Hello, Elizabeth here, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet a granny square book sleeve. This is a really fun way to protect your books and add some cute personality to them. I'm going to walk you through everything step by step. For this project, I'm using Red Heart Super Saver No. 4 medium worsted acrylic yarn and a 5mm crochet hook, as well as a darning needle and a pair of scissors. You can find links to these products in the description of this video. I started with these daisy granny squares. You can use any granny squares you like to make your book sleeve, but if you love these daisy ones, I have a full video tutorial and pattern for this granny square on my channel that you should see linked on your screen. The way you create your book sleeve is going to depend on the size of the book you want to cover, the size of your granny squares, and the size of your yarn and crochet hook. This video tutorial isn't exactly a pattern because it's so dependent on all of those factors, but I'm going to walk you through exactly how I made my book sleeve, and hopefully that will give you enough of a starting point to make your own. The book sleeve I'm making is for my Bible, which is pretty large. I can only fit 2 of my granny squares on each of the covers, so I'll need to crochet some more to cover the border, flaps on the inner edges of the covers, the remaining space on the covers, and the spine. I started by sewing 2 granny squares together with a darning needle. I like to use the pointy side of the needle to fray the end of the yarn, then fold it over the point tightly and slide out the needle to make a nice flat edge that can go through the eye of my needle. I sew my granny squares together by putting the right sides, or the prettier sides, facing each other, and then I sew my yarn through the outermost loops of the stitches on each side, zigzagging back and forth. This creates a nice flat join that isn't visible from the front. Then I just weave in and cut off the tail of the yarn. Next, I started crocheting a border to extend the space around the outside edges of the granny squares. I attached some yarn starting on one of the shorter sides of the rectangle, and did double crochet stitches all the way around to the end of the other short side, leaving the last long side untouched for now. When I got to the corners of the granny squares, I did 2 double crochet stitches into the corner, chained 2, and did another 2 double crochet stitches back into the same corner to create a new corner in this outer edge. This border of double crochet stitches was the perfect size to fill in the remaining space around my granny squares, but depending on how much extra space you need to fill, you may need to chain 1 and turn here to create another row around the border, and repeat as many times as needed to fill in the border space around your granny squares. But at this point, I just fastened off and weaved in my tail. Next, I needed to fill in more space along the remaining long side of my granny square rectangle. Again, I started at one end and did double crochet stitches in every stitch all the way across. When I got to the middle in between the 2 granny squares, I had a bit of a dip from where the corners meet. So in those spots, I did treble crochet stitches instead of double crochet to square it off and keep it even with the rest of the stitches along this edge. When I got to the end of the row, I chained one and turned, and repeated this process back across the same edge, but with only double crochet stitches since the dip is evened out and the treble stitches aren't needed this time. I repeated this 2 more times until it was long enough to cover basically the entire front of my Bible. Then I fastened off and weaved in my tail. Next, I needed to create a short flap that will attach to the edge of the cover and fold over onto the inside to create a little pocket for the cover to slip into. For this part, I started with a fresh piece of yarn and created a slip knot and chained 30 stitches, which covers the length of the cover from top to bottom. Then I chained one more and turned and did a row of double crochet stitches like I've been doing for the rest of the cover. I chained one and turned again to repeat this process for another row for a total of 3 rows of double crochet stitches. Next, I sewed this flap to the outer edge of the book cover using the same technique as I did when I joined the granny squares. So once again, I put the right sides facing each other and sewed back and forth across the outer loops of the edge stitches. I did this starting on the short side, then across the long side, and once again on the other short side, so that it would create a pocket for the book cover to slide into. To cover the spine, I did the same thing I just did for the short flap, where I started fresh with a slip knot and chained 30. For the spine, I did 5 rows of double crochet stitches to cover the remaining space between the 2 covers. And once again, I joined the spine piece to the cover piece by sewing across the outside stitches with the right sides facing each other. I created a second cover piece exactly the same way I created this one with my other 2 granny squares, and sewed that cover to the other side of the spine piece as well. Finally, I was almost done, but I had some areas around the edges where different pieces were sewn together and don't look perfectly smooth. So I did one final border of single crochet stitches all the way around the entire book cover. I did this even in the areas on the front and back that have the little cover flap attached, which creates a bit of an overhanging edge along the outside of the front and back covers and doesn't interfere with the way it slides into those flaps. Once I was done, I fastened off and sewed in my tails, and then I tucked my Bible into its brand new cozy sweater and did a bit of pulling and adjusting just to get the shape right and ensure a nice snug fit. And here is the final result. I think this turned out so cute, and because it slides right off, there's nothing permanent about it, I can create as many different covers as I want and mix and match them whenever. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and if you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel and leave a comment letting me know what sort of projects you'd like to see in the future. See you later!